1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to NHL Quick Hits. I'm David Crosby here with Steele Roden for a special episode to help you in your fantasy hockey drafts for the upcoming 2021-22 NHL season. As mentioned last episode, Steele and I have both compiled our 14 rounds of player rankings for standard league scoring. And as a reminder, that includes goals, assists, points, plus minus, power play points, shots, and blocks for players, wins, goals against average, save percentage, and shutouts for goalies. We've posted all of these rankings on our social media accounts. If you haven't seen the first episode, stop right here, go back, listen to the first 7 rounds, and then come right back here and finish it off with us. For this exercise, we went with a 12-team league. Each round will consist of 12 picks. On this episode, we're going to discuss rounds 8 through 14, including some of the most difficult decisions you're going to face in your draft, positional values, overvalued and undervalued players, and then, just like last time, some of the players Steele and I have ranked very differently. And like I mentioned in the first episode, it's very easy to draft in the first 7 rounds. People have their players ranked so closely. There's not a huge amount of, discrepancies in players ranked too high or too low. That is not the case. When you get past round 8, round 9, round 10, there are some players that people are drafting in their top 100 that aren't even going to be on other players' boards. So this is a really important part of the draft to really do your research and target some guys you want. Let's kick off round 8, picks 85 to 96. Steele, we both shot for guys with high upside in this round. We each had Taylor Hall, Spencer Knight, and Jason Robertson here. Taylor Hall, veteran on a great team. He's going to be back in Boston. He performed really well last year joining that lineup. I'm excited to see what he can do in a full season. Spencer Knight in Florida, rookie goalie. He's got huge expectations, but he's got a $10 million roadblock to the net in front of him. So that's probably why a guy as talented as him, frankly, is available this low in the draft. If he reaches this far in yours, some people might be reaching a little too high on Spencer Knight. And then lastly, Jason Robertson, a rookie of the year contender last season. He way outperformed expectations. And honestly, I'm not even sure there were expectations for him last year. If anybody drafted Jason Robertson in their draft last year, you should probably talk to that person because they know exactly what they're talking about. I hadn't even heard of this guy until a couple weeks into last season. So, it could be an exciting time for him to maybe take that next step, maybe be a point per game guy, one of the best guys on the Dallas Stars, or maybe he takes a step back in his sophomore season. So Steele, when talking about that trio, who has you the most excited?
I think it has to be Taylor Hall. We're talking about a guy who scored 19 points, 2 of those being goals in 37 games with the Buffalo Sabres last season, then gets traded to the Boston Bruins and went on to score 14 points, 8 of those being goals in 16 games. So obviously it's a different situation, it's a different organization, and there was a lot of belief right when he got there. And he really showed up and showed us that he still can be that kind of guy. So I think taking him in the 8th round, I have him at 85th, at the 85th spot. I think taking him in the 8th round, it would be a phenomenal choice for a guy like Taylor Hall. And then still, we're like you said with Spencer Knight, it's going to be hard for him to actually get the playing time if the Florida Panthers decide to continue with Sergei Bobrovsky. But if it were me, I would be starting with Spencer Knight. I think this guy's shown a lot of potential. I have him at the 91st pick position. That's where I would take him at if he's still available at that spot, which I believe he would. And then again, let's move on to Robertson. I have him at 94th. I think, like you said, there wasn't a lot of expectations. I don't think really anyone even knew who he was heading into the last season. And then he shocked us all. He shocked the world and really brought his A game. And I think, again, he's going to have another breakout season and top the one that he had last year. He's playing on the top line with Rupe Hintz and Joel Pavelski for the Dallas Stars. I think he's going to continue to play the way that he played last season. But for me, it's got to be Taylor Hall. He showed us what he can still do and that he can still play the game the way that we've seen him play in the past.
I think if any of these 3 players are available right now in your draft, you're getting a really good value. I think they've all got a pretty decently good floor. And I think, like we mentioned, all 3 have super high ceilings heading into this year. Let's move on to round 9, picks 97 to 108. And we both targeted some probable starters with high upside as our number 2 or maybe even number 3 goalie. Steele, you had Thatcher Demko at 101 and Blackwood, New Jersey's goalie, at number 103 there. I actually had Elvis Merzlikins at 98. Now, keep in mind, these are the value rankings of where I think a guy's going to finish. Am I going to draft Elvis Merzlikins at 98? Probably not. I'll probably wait till 120, 130 maybe even, because people are drafting him so low. But I think people are way too low on Merzlikins. I think he could have a really nice season. Mike Smith at 99th for me. Bishop as well. We talked about that crowded Dallas net. I think he's going to be the number 1 guy there, and he's had elite numbers in the past. The other 3, I'm not even going to mention. I know they're not going to be available at this point in my draft. This is just where I feel like they should be rated. That's Ilya Sorokin and the Washington Capitals duo of goalies. I just think they're not worth drafting any earlier than this to me, because I don't see them getting enough playing time to make it worth it. So, Steele, out of all of those goalies, do you think this is a good place for you to target your number 2 guy? And which of them has you the most excited if you could snatch him up?
Well, for me, this is actually where I picked my third goalie. Someone that I can swap in for when one of my first 2 goalies are either injured or just getting some rest time for the game, for that game and that night. So I think this is where I picked my third goalie. And like you said, it's going to be a guy who's either a starter on a lesser talented team, like a guy like you said, like a guy like Elvis Merzlikins if he's still available, Ilya Samsonov if he's there, Ben Bishop, you said that he probably is going to be the starter, or even Mackenzie Blackwood, who I think is a phenomenal young goaltender. This could also be where I pick a backup goaltender for a goalie that I already picked on the same team, because if I know that, let's say I have Semyon Varlamov, I know I can pick Ilya Sorokin, and those 2 are going to be in and out with each other. So again, this is where I usually pick my third goalie, and it really is to just kind of fill out that goalie situation and get my value where I can with the goalies that are still remaining.
And I'm glad you mentioned the backup, because not a lot of people do that. And frankly, I don't do that nearly often enough in fantasy hockey. I'm always looking for the guy that I think is going to own the net, that's going to get 60 or 65% of those starts minimum. If somebody's getting 35% of the starts, most of the time, I don't even want them on my team. But the New York Islanders, probably the best defensive team in the league, both of those guys are probably going to put up really nice numbers for you. So if you can draft both of them, you're getting 82 games of quality goaltending on a really good team. Let's move on to round 10, picks 109 to 120. Former 40 goal scorers are not usually available here. Steele, you took the bait on one of them, ranking Vladimir Tarasenko 111th. Now, I might have underrated him a little bit here. I'm probably a little bit salty because I made a trade for him a few years back on a keeper league, and it's been haunting me ever since. I've got him ranked all the way down at 150th. Why are you drafting Tarasenko here, despite all the question marks that come with him?
See, I think this is the one time I'm ever going to disagree with you in my life, because you're such a smart guy, and you've proven to me so many times why you're right most of the time. But I think it's ridiculous that you let him slide all the way to 150. Looking at his stats, looking at the way he's coming back from injury, he had 24 points in 34 games combined in the last 2 seasons. It combined in the last 2 seasons, which isn't even that bad. But the fact that he's only played 34 games in 2 years is what scares me the most. The 5 seasons prior to that, he's averaged over 67 points. I can't believe you can let a guy who's coming off shoulder surgery, obviously that will affect your decision. It's going to scare you a little bit, but he's coming off shoulder surgery. He had injuries the last 2 seasons. It can't scare you that much. You have to take a chance. If we can take a chance on Jack Eichel in the 7th round, we can take a chance on Vladimir Tarasenko in this round. And like I said, obviously he's dealing with some things. He's a little frustrated with the way the medical staff on the St. Louis Blues have handled this situation. Maybe he gets traded. Maybe he plays for a different team and he goes off. We don't know. The same way we don't really know with Jack Eichel. He's still going to be playing for the Blues. He's on the second line. I think he brings a lot of value to the team and to your fantasy team. I
think you made a great case here. And, when we're all done, I'm certainly going to be moving him up higher than 150 because I did have him too low. You know, just to be honest, sometimes you have to be real and think, okay, maybe I did get a little too emotional about where I put this guy, either too high or too low on your draft boards. It's a difficult thing to do when you've been burned by a guy in the past, or maybe he went on a really hot streak and won you a season. It's difficult to get that out of your mind when you're ranking them. So that's why it's good to compare your board with a bunch of others that you trust. If you want to shy away, though, from a risky forward with high upside like Vladimir Tarasenko, then this could be a good round to target undervalued defensemen. Steele, we both have the Senators' #1 D-man, Thomas Chabot. I have him at 112. You're at 117. And you've also got Zach Werenski in this round. I've got him going next round, but he'd probably be available at that point too. Do you like this as a round to target one of those defensemen? And what do you think their ceiling is? Are they good enough to be your second defenseman?
No, they're not quite my second defenseman because, like we've already talked about in the previous episode for this fantasy league topic, I've already chosen guys like Aaron Ekblad and Morgan Riley, even maybe Charlie McAvoy. But this is where I target maybe my third, my fourth guy who's really going to bring that value and keep my team alive on the defensive side of things. So yeah, a guy like Thomas Chabot, who's going to get it, who plays a ton of minutes for the Ottawa Senators, who's going to be playing on the power play, the penalty kill. Guys like Zach Werenski, who loves to jump up in the place and shoot the puck. These are guys who bring a lot of value to the I guess the bottom side of where we're heading right now in the draft, and they're still top guys. So again, this is exactly where I'm looking to fill the third or fourth slot in my defensive for my team. And guys like Thomas Chabot and Zach Werenski are the guys who I'm looking at.
If I'm getting either or maybe even both of those guys in back-to-back rounds here, I'm absolutely thrilled. And me personally, I think Chabot has an outside chance to be good enough to be a #2 D-man, because all the offensive talent, the young offensive talent that's in Ottawa, we mentioned Brady Tkachuk last episode and how you thought this could potentially be a breakout offensive season for him. Every single puck goes through Thomas Chabot in Ottawa. He is on the ice basically the entire game, this guy. So if you think Ottawa is going to be improved offensively this year, which I do, I think Chabot might be the biggest benefactor of that. Let's move on to round 11, picks 121 to 132. Even this low, there are some really intriguing top 6 guys who still might be available on your boards. We mentioned Tarasenko. How about former 44 goal scorer Patrick Laine? I can't believe this is the area that he's projected to go. Edmonton's new winger, Zach Hyman, you can just about guarantee that he's going to be playing with either Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, and sometimes even both of those guys on the power play, maybe even first line minutes. So he's got some exciting potential up front. You've got Capitals tough guy Tom Wilson, of course, in leagues that count hits and penalty minutes. He probably wouldn't be available here, but in other leagues, he still knows how to score. It doesn't matter that he's got heavy hands. He's got soft hands in front of the net. He can put the puck in the net. He can set up guys like Alex Ovechkin. And then lastly, a guy who I'm kind of intrigued by this year, the Red Wings #1 center, Dylan Larkin. So of those guys, who's got you most excited with their offensive potential?
I think it has to be Zach Hyman and Tom Wilson. Those two guys really stand out to me when we're talking about this late in the draft. I think Zach Hyman for sure when he has the opportunity to play with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and he gets to play with them on the power play. Obviously, he's not as talented. He won't get as much points. He's not going to score as much, but he's going to be around them. And Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl know how to facilitate. They know how to find people on the ice, and Zach Hyman knows how to get in those areas where he's not seen, but he also just loves being in front of the net and digging for those rebounds. So a guy like Zach Hyman in this round would be great for my team. But like you also said, and I agree with your point on Tom Wilson here, people don't understand how well he's a great shooter. He can actually shoot the puck. He's not going to score 25, 30, 35 goals like the rest of the top talented guys on the Washington Capitals or the top talented guys in the rest of the league, but he has a lot of potential to shoot the puck, and we've seen him be able to shoot the puck. The only problem is he gets suspended so often. He hurts himself. He stabs him. He shoots himself in his own foot. So that's the only thing that scares me a lot about Tom Wilson. But obviously, if you're in a banger league and you're counting penalty minutes and you're counting block shots and hits, Tom Wilson is the guy for you because he can score when he wants to, especially when he's playing with Alex Ovechkin, and he brings all of those things to the table.
I have to agree with you there in Edmonton. I think that Hyman's going to fit in really nicely, but I've got Patrick Laine ahead of all of these guys. And I think when you look at his stats and how he was, yes, he was inconsistent week to week, but when you look at him for a season to season basis, prior to last year, where yes, he had less than half a point per game. Yes, he was a disgusting -29 on a really bad Columbus team, but it's a new year in Columbus. I think they're going to be a lot better. John Tortorella is no longer there haunting Patrick Laine's dreams. He has a little bit of that familiarity with some players. I think he is an elite offensive player, one of the best goal scorers in the entire league. He had a 44-goal season. After that, he had 30. As a rookie, he put up 36 goals in 73 games. All this guy does is score, and you're going to write him off for a 45-game fluke of a season. I think that's just wrong. I think this guy is going 2 or 3 rounds too low, frankly, and I'm jumping all over him if he drops to me here in the draft. More goalies may be available in this round as well, and it might be your last chance to grab a starter. Alex Nedeljkovic, Tuukka Rask, Carter Hart, Jacob Markstrom, and Cal Peterson are some of the goalies we had ranked in this area. Which of these late round goalies do you think will both be available here and could help you steal your league, Steele?
Again, I think if I haven't picked my third goalie already, I'm looking at a guy like Carter Hart. I think obviously we know how difficult of a year he had last season. And I think, again, like I believe he's going to have a bounce back season. I think the Philadelphia Flyers have gotten better. I think they've gotten better, a little bit better defensively. And I think Carter Hart has really worked this offseason to get back mentally into the game. You could see every time he stepped on the ice or when things went a little wrong, he looked scared out there. And I think he really worked hard this offseason to kind of fix those things that he struggled with. And that's where I'm kind of leaning towards with my third pick if I haven't picked my third goalie already.
Yeah, I think both Hart and Markstrom are their teams are going to sink or swim with them, and maybe they don't have the bounce back year that we're hoping for, but regardless, you can be sure that they're going to see a ton of net. A guy like Cal Peterson, he's supposed to be the starter. Can he actually take more than 50% of the starts there from somebody like Jonathan Quick, who's been so good, who, frankly doesn't seem ready to give up any of his net, and who a guy the Kings are paying a lot of money? Alex Nedeljkovic, that's another guy that could be a huge swing in a lot of leagues because he put up really nice stats. Now he's going to a really poor defensive team in Detroit. But is he going to get that number one job? Is he just going to be handed it out of the gates and get 65% of those starts? He maybe could be really valuable in that case. And Tuukka Rask, if you have an IR spot, I think Rask could be a really sneaky choice, especially when you look at where Boston's other goalies are being drafted right now. I know he's not signed there in Boston. I know he's not, ready to start the season. But I think later on in the year, he said this is the only place he wants to play. I could see him coming back and grabbing that number one spot in the net once again. Let's finish off with rounds 12 through 14. We're going to span picks 133 through 168. And the reason we're grouping all these together is, like I said at the start, there's so much variance. So many of these guys are going to be taken really early, maybe even 40, 50 picks apart in some drafts. Rankings are going to vary a lot. So there's a ton of potential steals, though, when you look at that amount of variance. The key is identifying them. Here's some players that you and I both have ranked in these 3 rounds. And I think, Steele, these could be near point per game forwards. Kevin Fiala, Ryan Strome, Sean Couturier, Claude Giroux, Jakub Voracek, and Anthony Mantha. Out of that group, who sticks out to you?
I think it has to be Ryan Strome. And to me, he's been one of my favorite players over the last couple of seasons just because he kind of came out of nowhere, and there was a lot of talk about Dylan Strome all the time it was Dylan Strome. And then he gets to New York, and he's just phenomenal. 60-point season after 60-point season. So for me, it has to be Ryan Strome. If he's fallen this low, of course I'm taking a guy like Ryan Strome because he's a guy, one of those guys who's very sneaky. You don't really think about it, but when you look at the stats and you look at the way he plays a game, he's a terrific player. Someone that I would also like to throw in this conversation is a guy like Vincent Trocheck. maybe with him, obviously, looking back at their lineup right now, he is at the third line center, but I think he has a lot of potential to be a point per game type of player, or close to a point per game type of player too. So for me, it's got to be Ryan Strome, but adding a guy like Vincent Trocheck into the group that you just listed, I think that could also be a play for this late round.
Ryan Strome has to be one of the least talked about players for the amount of points that he's put up in the last couple seasons. You never hear anybody talking about Ryan Strome, but he's so consistent and he's in such a great offense that I think he'd be a really good steal here. Kevin Fiala, kind of in the same boat, maybe a little less consistent than Ryan Strome, but he's also in a really nice situation right now, and I could see him putting up a lot of points. Anthony Mantha, of course, big name with that trade last year. He could be on that first power play. Washington has had, some injuries already heading into the season. He might get a really big opportunity there. And then I hate to group these guys together. Two of them are Flyers, one of them a former Flyer, but you pretty much know what you're getting with Voracek, Giroux, and Couturier. I mean, I can't see any of these guys scoring less than 0.65 points per game. I think they're all going to be north of that mark, and I think a lot of them have a lot more potential and deserve to be ranked a little bit higher than people are taking them here, but you can pretty much be sure at least two of those guys are probably going to be available for you in this range if you agree and think they're going to produce. Now, this is also a great place to draft some sleeper D-men. I'm sure, Steele, you meticulously plan your drafts. There is absolutely no chance that you haven't taken 4 defensemen by now, but just pretend you're me and that you loaded up on goalies, you fell in love with some forwards, and you look and, oh my goodness, it's round 12 and I have 2 defensemen. I think many teams often head into this range with just 2 or 3 defensemen on their team. These 6 guys were ranked in this range by both of us. Rasmus Dahlin, Vince Dunn, Ty Smith, Rasmus Ristolainen, Erik Karlsson, and Mark Giordano. Who are you eyeing most from that bunch?
I think probably Erik Karlsson for me would be the choice that I have, as well as maybe Ty Smith. I think that could be a sleeper pick on the defensive side when you're looking towards your 5th or 6th slot, depending on how many defensemen you have on your team. But again, there's also a name that I'd like to throw in: Ryan Suter, Matt Grzelcyk, Jake Muzzin. Those guys could also be some sleeper picks. I really like Ryan Suter on the Dallas Stars moving forward this season. I think he could bring a lot to the table for them. But again, I think any of those guys that you just mentioned can be really beneficial for your team in these late round picks.
Well, Steele, let's just wrap it up here with just a couple more talking points. So after going through 14 rounds of this draft, is there anything that you're taking away, either a part of your strategy that you didn't like, something you'd like to do over, or just something you learned going through this exercise that you think is really important to having a good draft?
I can tell you with full confidence that the way I run my fantasy team, it works every season for me. I'm usually in the top 3 or top 4 spots, and I'm usually winning the big bucks, if I can say that. And I'm not afraid to say that because I'm that confident. The way I choose to pick my team, with matching my forwards with my defense, or some of my forwards with my defensemen, picking those top tier goalies a little bit earlier than others would, and then kind of, again, filling out some of my top 3 defensemen a little bit earlier, jumping the gun, it really helps my team out to be as best as it can. And when you get to those later round picks, it's really just pick and grab and go kind of thing for me. So for me, it's the first 10 rounds that really matter. I did screw up last year where I don't know why I did this, and I picked Matt Murray with my, I believe, 7th round pick, and it didn't work whatsoever. I still ended up coming 4th in my league. But again, I think for me, it's really focusing on the things that you tend not to focus on, choosing goalies a little bit earlier, taking some top defensemen in those earlier round picks, around 3, 5, and 6. I would pick those the top 3 defensemen, but that's what works for me. Everyone's a little bit different, and sometimes some things work out a little bit better for other people, but that's how I like to run my fantasy team.
I think that's really smart advice, and I think that's something that myself and a lot of other fantasy drafters do way too much, is wait too long to pick the defenseman and wait too long to pick yourself that number 1 and number 2 goalie. And just going through this exercise and ranking guys here late, when you're starting to get past pick 150, there are at least 30 forwards that I would consider taking here that I did not put in my top 14 rounds that I think have really good potential this season and could really put up points. So back to your point of addressing those defensive and goaltender positions early, I think that is key to having a good draft, because you can just about guarantee there are going to be some nice forwards available on your draft board. And even if you miss, I guarantee nice forwards will be a lot easier to find on the waiver wire mid and early in the season than it will be to find a starting goaltender or a really nice defenseman. We mentioned Jason Robertson earlier, of course. If you snatched him up last season, you know, you probably did pretty well in your league, because he was a starter just about every time he was playing. That's all for today's episode. Please like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Follow us on social media and let us know what you think of our rankings, and maybe give us your own personal ranks. Steele, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but what do you think about redoing our drafts over the next week or so and coming back and revisiting them for an episode? Look where maybe we overlooked or under or overranked some guys.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And I think we've already talked about this, where I've made some bad decisions, where I put Evgeny Kuznetsov a little bit earlier than I should have. You with Vladimir Tarasenko as well, putting him a little later in the draft. Again, I think there's a couple of guys that we even missed that weren't even in these top in the 14 rounds that we just did right now. So I think we could definitely go back, take a look over what we've done. Obviously, I think I believe the top 3 to 4 rounds are pretty set in my opinion. But after that, there's definitely some things that can be switched around, and guys that aren't even in my 14 rounds or 168 pick could be brought up into that situation. So for me, I'd love to do that and see what kind of switched around for both of us.
Sounds good. Keep it locked here to NHL Quick Hits. We're going to have fantasy advice all throughout the season. On behalf of Steele Roden, I'm David Crosby, and thanks for tuning in to NHL Quick Hits.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.